Welcome to the Anti-Average Podcast. My name is Justin Carrico, and my goal is to help you stick it to the status quo because you were created for more. I am super excited about today's episode. It is a special episode. We have a guest here today. This guest is was named Forbes Top 20 speaker that you need to hear. He is someone who has been super influential in nonprofits and businesses. His best-selling book actually transformed many nonprofits and businesses, and honestly had a huge impact on some of the organizations that I get the privilege to lead as well. And so our guest today, help me welcome Jeff Henderson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Justin. Great to be here, man.
Honored that you would choose to be here with us today.
Honored to be here.
Love to just have you share some of your story. Your story is so probably in the context of many of our listeners, because it navigates through different maybe seasons or different even sections of life, going from the business world, working with Atlanta Braves, and then heading into nonprofit and ministry, and now stepping out into something new. So I'd love to just hear some of your story, if you would. Start from wherever you want to.
Sure. Well, I grew up a preacher's kid, so I promised myself I would never ever work at a church, and ended up working at a church for 18 years. So never say never, you know. But I developed an interest in marketing and sports marketing. So I grew up in Atlanta, and it's been a bleak existence as an Atlanta sports fan for the most part. We've built more stadiums than we've won championships, you know. But long story short, I wound up working for the Atlanta Braves, and I grew up a huge Hank Aaron and Braves fan when I was younger, and so to be able to do sports marketing, and so I learned so much about marketing and advertising there. And had the opportunity to work for several other organizations, wound up working at Chick-fil-A and handled all their regional and beverage and sports marketing for them. But long story short, my wife, and we can get into this if you want to, we felt called to leave that to go help start a church in the Atlanta area. And so that took place over the course of 18 years, and launched 3 churches in the Atlanta area. Wow. And what I discovered is, while there's some differences between the business world, the for-profit world, and the nonprofit world, there's actually more similarities. And I discovered that whatever world you're in, people need to be led well. Typically, there's pretty much the same issues. I mean, even though you might be selling different products or doing different things. And so there's a lot that business leaders can learn from nonprofit leaders. There's a lot that nonprofit leaders can learn from business leaders. So after 18 years, after I wrote the first book, I started getting a lot of speaking requests to come to speak to businesses and organizations. And that led us to this next season of being able to, as I look back on my career, I'm like, I can go to the business world and serve them, or I can go to be with great nonprofit leaders like yourself. So I've been just kind of following the journey along the way.
So you mentioned starting and launching 3 churches there in the Atlanta area. Difficult road, starting from nothing. Was that kind of from scratch, or was that was there already some buy-in from some other organizations or churches with that?
So a little of both to that.
Okay.
Yes and no. I mean, obviously I had a huge advantage because I was at North Point Community Church, which was a booming church in the Atlanta area, but this was the first campus, multi-site campus that they'd ever launched, and it was a video campus. So You're trying to explain this to people, and it was kind of this new idea, and I like gray. I like is this going to work? I like, and so there wasn't anything we could point to and go, here's how a multi-site video church works. And we got some pushback because people would say, well, video preaching is not in the New Testament. To which I would say neither is air conditioning, but we use that too, right?
Praise God for that.
But I love all of that. So I had the advantage of being at North Point, but I wanted to wake up and think, what if I wasn't affiliated with that, in the sense of I got to be scrappy. Sometimes when you're with a large organization, you can trick yourself into not being scrappy, and that's the challenge. When an organization starts to get really, really large, it can lose that entrepreneurial edge, and they don't stick it to the status quo. The status quo begins to take over. So I kind of have a propensity in my career, Justin, every 7 years I end up doing something different. I don't really plan it that way. It just seems like, I think one of my many faults as a leader is I can get bored quickly. So I enjoy the early startup days, and they're humble, but the scriptures teach that don't despise the days of humble beginnings. Yeah, so I love those startup early days. But even when you scale, like obviously I worked at Chick-fil-A. I worked for, a massive organization at Chick-fil-A, a massive nonprofit at North Point. And I believe in systems and scale, because you got to have 2 pickles on the sandwich, right? Unless somebody wants 3. Sometimes people want 3. Sometimes people want, my wife wants 0 pickles, right? I get all that, but we can't let systems and scale drive out the humanity of the business. And so that's one of the things I learned in large organizations is don't lose the person. Dan Cathy, the son of the founder of Chick-fil-A, would say, let's grow a small company. Let's grow, but let's don't lose that small feel. That's harder than it looks,
Sure.
and easier than it seems. But so there's so many lessons I learned from both of those worlds. But I'm so grateful I was able to be on the launch, on the early phase of these startup churches, because as a nonprofit leader, the only thing that you really have to sell really is vision and purpose.
Yeah.
And if you can figure that out, and especially if you can figure out vision and purpose and communicate it, man, it's so helpful as a leader and for their organizations.
I love one aspect that you were mentioning there, even with scaling, being able to make sure you don't lose the relationship piece of that, because really leading in any organization is still the same. It's relational. It's all about trust. It's all about relationship. So I love the fact that no matter how large it may be, no matter how the business scales or the nonprofit scales, being able to do that with the relational aspect of this, knowing, hey, that's the key part of this.
So I give you 2 quick examples. At Chick-fil-A, we were required to work 2 days in a store. So, and I'm telling you what, you want to talk about nervous, is when I put on the headset for the drive-through at 11:30, and you're like, okay, and everybody's like, oh, we have to get people through, and Chick-fil-A has this reputation for quick and fast and getting it right.
Yeah.
So there's that. The other example I just saw today, Starbucks has named a new CEO, and one of the things he's doing is once a week going to work out of a store, out of a Starbucks store. That's so helpful.
Yeah.
To be able to learn on the ground and to be able to see customer interactions, because what happens in leadership, if you're not careful, you get promoted away from the front line of the organization. And the front line is where the customer is.
Yeah.
Sometimes organizations can have the lofty corner office, and it's far, far away from the customer.
Yeah, almost in a bubble by itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Believing your own little environment and your own little world, and really losing reality.
Yeah. Data can help you. Data can inform you, but it should not lead you.
Yeah, so some of that, I guess maybe leads into or it mentions. I want to mention the book I mentioned earlier, For. Know what you're for. This right here, this book, this resource is really what I would call it, instrumental in transforming so many businesses, nonprofits, specifically even churches, but definitely businesses, knowing why they exist, really redesigning or refocusing their purpose, I would even say. Share a little bit about that. I feel like it was, is this your first book?
It is.
Okay, first book. Killed it first time out the gate.
Thank you.
So that's huge to be able to say and to do. And I feel like it just had a massive following. So many people who just got on board with it and overhauled maybe their whole systems and focus and purpose and mission because of that. So I'd love to hear just some stories from that. And then I want to dig into your new book as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for leaders like you, Justin, that you're doing For Mayfield, and the great thing about that is you guys are doing things that I can pass along and learn from. So that's so great. I'm so grateful for that, and it's great for me. But it really started, and again, this is part of this. If you're a person of faith, I would say that for me, this is God's writing a story with your life, and this was not part of the story until I looked back on my career and thought, oh my goodness. So when I launched the second location in Atlanta, we began to ask some marketing questions, I felt like, and that is, number one, what do we want to be known for, and what are we known for? And in that meeting early on, one of our team members said, when it comes to the church, I think many people are more familiar with what the church is against rather than what the church is for. And that was just a moment where I just thought, wow, well, what are we for? And we launched this church in Gwinnett County. My wife and I grew up in Gwinnett County, and we just felt like, we're for Gwinnett kids, we're for Gwinnett students, we're for Gwinnett businesses, we're for Gwinnett, adults. And we launched For Gwinnett. And we bought property and put a sign out there, and it just said #For Gwinnett. And there was no website, no Bible verse, no GwinnettChurch.org. And I got pushback on that because, we hadn't really launched the church, and people were like, and I totally understood the pushback. It's like, hey, how are they going to know it's a church?
Sure.
And to which I said, exactly,
yeah.
They're not. So we gave everybody T-shirts and said, when people ask you, what is that sign? We want you to say that it's a church. And when they say, well, why does it say For Gwinnett? Well, in that moment, whatever our volunteers were saying, there weren't that many, but at that time, that's gold, that's language. And I tell leaders that vision's like a bucket of water, and the more words that are in the bucket, the more the words fall out. So we wanted to give them just enough words so they could take that bucket of words and bucket of vision and pass it on. And they just said, well, it's a church, because many people are more familiar with what the church is against. We believe God's for you and we're for you. And those conversations just exploded our church. So fast forward a couple of years later, I came in the office one day and I had a coffee mug from Winnipeg. It said "For Winnipeg." And I thought, oh my goodness. And then I started getting T-shirts in the mail. And I mean, if you need a T-shirt, I've got them. So,
from anywhere.
Yeah. So and I just thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And so great leaders like yourself took this and have made it even better, far beyond what I even thought of. But the fun thing came that 2 or 3 seasons ago, it kind of came full circle for me, because I began my career with the Atlanta Braves. So the Braves launched For the A. And I'll just say this, the season they launched For the A, they won the World Series. Yeah, just say it, all right?
Has something to do with it.
I think I should get a ticket or two. But they're asking, some questions. Hey, who are we playing for and what are we playing for? And those are so simple questions, but they're not easy questions. And so again, we're talking about vision. But the 2 questions that the book is based on is, what do you want to be known for and what are you known for? And when the answers to those 2 questions match, when you want to be for Mayfield, and that's what Catalyst Church is known for, then what you do is you begin to shrink the gap and you get closer to your potential. And so it's been fun for me. But the thing I love about this is that I'm able to go back and forth between, I'm here with you the next couple of days. A couple of days ago, I was with this big company in Atlanta. They did this big rebrand. It's this trade show industry, and I was doing this very same talk for them, but it was just I'm just able to easily transition in between these fields. And John Maxwell, who, if you're familiar with John, he's written more on leadership than any author ever. He can just transition so seamlessly between government, church, education, arts and entertainment, media. And he's a man of faith, and he's really been a model for me to try to follow and do that. So it's really a marketing book, but it's really more of a vision casting book.
Yeah, I love the crossover there, and even mentioning John Maxwell. I know you're a Maxwell thought leader yourself, but the way that he's always John. Mm-hmm. In every scenario, in every situation, he's always John. And it sounds like even with the things that you mentioned in this book, Know What You're For. The crossover is there, because even in the culture in which we live, businesses today, you almost have to have a hey, we want to help the world around us. We want to increase awareness of certain things. We want to make sure that we are stepping into situations that need to be identified and even helped. And so it's such a timely message, even in the culture in which we live, especially right now. That leads to the new book then. You've written a new book, What to Do Next. And this is more along the story of you stepping away from, and I'm going to say it this way, you stepping away from your success and starting over. It must have been 7 years, a new 7-year hit.
That's right.
But stepping away from something that was comfortable, known, successful. You could have sat back. You could have said, hey, I'm going to soak in all the fruit of the harvest now. The hard work has been done. Here we go. And instead, felt like that maybe God was navigating you in a different way. And I would even say navigating you to more impact because of expanding maybe some horizons and things that you're doing. So love to hear kind of the basis of this book, play some of that out, what to do next.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the podcast is stick it to the status quo, right? So,
that's right.
And I'm not saying where I was with status quo by any means, but I think what we have to do is be really, really careful and a little scared of comfort. And I love comfort. Okay, I'm all for comfort. But the big issue for me is, am I growing? And am I growing or am I coasting? And I just felt like the other thing that Kathy taught me, who's the founder of Chick-fil-A, is pay attention to unexpected opportunities. So I started getting these requests, like from you and from other folks, saying, hey, even in the middle of COVID, could you do a webcast? Could you do a Zoom call to help lead our company or business? And my wife and I had just become empty nesters, and so we thought, okay, this might be an opportunity for me to be able to do this now. And I have a personal board of advisors, which I talk about in the book, and all of them gave me a green light. The mentors in my life gave me a green light, but I didn't really know exactly what this was going to look like.
Right.
And that's the scary part, because it's one thing to go, all right, I'm going to go from Chick-fil-A to help to North Point Ministries, but I know that they give a paycheck every 2 weeks, so that's great. This is the first time in my life that I don't get paid every 2 weeks. If I don't go out and do something, we don't eat, and so that's really, really scary. But my wife Wendy and I feel like, no, let's go do this. And there's a quote I put in the book. It's actually from Clint, that great theologian Clint Eastwood, and he said, "Don't let the old man win." And what he means is that the older we get, the less risk we have to take. We begin to take, because we have more at stake.
Sure.
And I don't want to live like that. But this isn't a call for people to take stupid risk, do something rash, be unwise. But it really is a call to bring the best next version of you. Sometimes the best next version of you is to stay. But sometimes the greatest risk isn't leaving. Sometimes the greatest risk is staying. And so you got to do the hard work to figure that out. But you have to pay attention to unexpected opportunities. And so when I left, I started getting all these calls from people, much like the 4 book. Hey, how did you figure this out? I'm thinking about, and I didn't know that I was going to initially bump into the Great Resignation, and
Sure.
Resignation Nation, and people quitting their jobs. And how did you figure that out? I wish I could figure out what to do next. And that's when I thought, that's what I'm going to write about, just what to do next. So this is kind of, if anybody says, should I leave my job, or I'm trying to figure out what to do next, what would you tell me? I would just go, this is what I would tell you, because not only would I tell you, this is what I did.
It's really a story of how you transitioned, and I love one of the statements that you made, and you kind of hit on it right there, but you make the statement that your dream job often comes through your day job.
Right.
And I'd love for you to explain that a little bit. Like, how did you know, hey, this is my dream job, and kind of stepping into this, and how did you know outside of your board of advisors? And I love that you had some people who were like, hey, these are the people I want to listen to. I trust them. They love me. I love them. They're willing to tell me the hard stuff, the good stuff. Because so many times we give everyone access to our emotions.
Right.
And we don't need to do that. And so having that board of advisors, if you are that person, I want to encourage you, get this. Even just for that, I think it's one of the chapters, listening. It's on listening and who to listen to, and how to let go of some things, some hurts, and then who are you listening to in your life. But you do mention your dream job coming from your day job. Talk through that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, to go back to your point, Justin, when it comes to listening to people, I tell preachers, especially when it comes to sermons, because we all get emails from time to time, and you don't need to listen to everyone, but you do need to listen to someone.
Sure.
And you need to have that trusted voice. But the reason that your dream job comes through your day job is, first of all, your day job helps you build your personal network. I believe we're just two or three conversations away from that next opportunity. Apparently, we're all 6 degrees away from Kevin Bacon from Footloose. So if we're 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon, we might just be 3 or 4 conversations between what's next. And so, but a lot of people are sitting on a gold mine of contacts they just don't ever leverage. I mean, and you may say, well, I'm not in my day job. I'm not in the dream job. I'm in a day job that has nothing to do with what my dream job would be. That's okay. I bet you are coming in contact with people that could get you there. And I talk about the whole system of how to do that. But the question that you ask when you sit down with someone is, who do you know that I need to know? Well, first of all, tell me your story. What can I learn from you? And then, who do you know that I need to know, and will you contact them on my behalf? And building your network is kind of like life insurance. You really want it if you need it, right? And so I believe your personal net worth is really largely connected to your personal network. The other reason that your dream job leads from your day job, for me, the day job was an opportunity for me to be a good steward of where I was, and just to do because when I sit down with people and they're not happy with their job, and we get through all of that, and I go, okay, here's my most important piece of advice: go back to where you are, where you're working right, and do your very best. And they always get a little frustrated with me, Justin, because they're like, did you not pay attention? I don't like where I am, right? But you need to be faithful where you are.
Yeah.
Be faithful. Do your very, very best where you are. My dad used to say, be faithful where you are, God's paying attention. Be
Mm.
faithful where you are, God's paying attention. So be faithful where you are, do your best, build your network. But I really believe in side hustles. I believe while you have that day job,
Sure.
it's funding things that you can go out and do a side hustle. So let me tell you what a side hustle for me was. I felt like the first book here would be really good, but I didn't know. I never, as you said, I never done this before. So
Sure.
what I did to create a side hustle is I created this idea called a business breakfast. And North Point has all these partnership churches. So I went to North Point and said, hey, what if we do this? Because a lot of North Point churches do four. I said, what if I go and do a business breakfast for our North Point partnership churches? And it's an opportunity for the church to reach out to the business community. And there are a lot of people at churches that would like to invite their friends or coworkers to church, but they might be a little scared about the Sunday thing, so they don't do it. So what if we take the Sunday thing out, do a Monday morning or a Friday morning thing? It's purely marketing, build your business, all that. I do it. And let me go try it out. I think it's a win for the church. I think it's a win for North Point. I think it's a win for me. So everybody said yes. I did about 40 of these.
Hmm.
And I was in Elkhorn, Nebraska. The Relevant Church, Ronnie Rothy, the pastor there, and they do for Elkhorn. So it was a sold out event, and all these requests for, could you come speak to our organization, all that. But I called my wife Wendy, and nothing against Elkhorn, Nebraska. It's a beautiful place. But I told Wendy, if Elkhorn, Nebraska is buying into this, I think we may have discovered what's next. But you have to try it out.
Sure.
You have to. That's why, like at Chick-fil-A, they're launching a new sandwich. I can't tell you what it is yet, but later this fall. But they've already tested it out in a few markets to know exactly what percentage of sales it will be, how's it going to do, how they make it, all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes we just launch out into a career without testing it. And I really believe in side hustles and testing. And so that's what your day job. Sometimes we have to quit our day job. Sometimes our day job quits us. Okay. I understand that. But don't quit too soon. I'm just such a big believer in trying to have those side hustles, those experiments to see if this idea is working. And so that, for me, the side hustle with this was the business breakfast that gave me an indication that this was an idea worth pursuing.
I love that. And actually, when this podcast airs, we will have just wrapped up our first leader lunch. Very similar to the same thing,
Yep.
having business leaders come
Yep.
in, and we actually will be walking through some things to hopefully add value to them,
Yeah.
and help them be better leaders. So I love even that
Which
connection.
is so smart on your point, but from your perspective and what you all are doing. I don't know why this is, but the church world and the business world don't talk that often. I don't know why that is. And what you're doing is like, no, we want to add value to the business world.
Yeah, and just really create that common space and conversation, because there's so much that, like you said earlier, we can learn from each other. You mentioned also in this book, and which connects with even what you just shared there, play to your strengths. So while you're testing maybe the side hustle, being able to navigate and really dig deeper in or grow in your strengths, which connects back to a previous podcast, our first podcast. We mentioned point number 2, I think it was, be aware, and it was to know your strengths and to know your weaknesses, manage your weaknesses so they don't become obstacles to your excellence, but focus on your strengths, so that is where you then have a higher capacity to grow, to impact the world.
Right.
You've got higher potential there. If you focus on your weaknesses, the best you're going to get is average. You're going to be stuck at the bottom of the barrel with everybody else, kind of thing. So figuring out that, I love, you mentioned in your book, play to your strengths. I think that connects with the side hustle. As you start learning your strengths, test it with some side hustle ways or thoughts or avenues. Anything else that you would add to that when you're talking about playing to your strengths and just learning really how you're gifted?
Well, again, as a person of faith, I would say God's thumbprints on you are his clues or clues about his plans for you. And so I've done a variety of different things. I've been in the business world. I've worked for Chick-fil-A, the Braves, a church, and doing what I'm doing now. But typically it's still in the strengths of vision, which is a strength of mine, communication, which is a strength of mine, leadership, innovation, and creativity. That's an encouragement. Those are my gift mix. And it may look different. The product may be different. The delivery may be different, but those are what I think I'm going to lean in on. And see, in this next season, you're not going to see me launch a country music album. It's nowhere in my
Come
gift
on.
mix. You know,
Come
there's
on.
no, there's not. I might like it, but I don't. You know, and you have to understand too. There's a difference between a hobby and a business. A hobby costs you money, and a business makes you money. And so sometimes we are more interested in what we're passionate about and less interested in what our strengths are. I'm all for discovering your passions. That's great. But I think your strengths are more important because you can be. I'm passionate about college football, but I was terrible at football, and I have opinions about football, but I'd be a terrible coach. So that's something I'm passionate about, but I don't have a strength in it. I have a strength in what I've written here, and so I've got to stay close to this strength. And many times we either discount our strengths because we think everybody else is strong that way, or we wish we had other strengths. So again, I'm all for being passionate, but what are your strengths? And so that's one of the first questions I ask somebody. And if they can't tell me what their strengths are, then they got to go do the hard work on that to figure that out.
Yeah. And, kind of feeding off of that is something that I think as I'm growing as a leader, as a human as well, and learning my strengths, I think the one thing that really has started to stand out to me is you can look for the area that obviously comes natural to you, comes quick. And I would even say it this way, that you're often cheating.
Yeah.
It's so easy to cheat your gift because you're like, hey, if you're good at communicating, hey, I can throw this together. Give me 5 minutes. Let's do this. I can stand in front of people and I can talk. And I think you'd be able to do it extremely well, far beyond somebody who's not gifted in communication. And maybe with timelines with books or something like that, obviously there's deadlines and you got to hit with editors and stuff like that. But I do think that there are probably ways that as we watch our strengths, if you're pulling something together last minute and it's still excellent work, or it's good work, let's not go excellent, it's probably even a sign of your strengths because it's an area that you're cheating your gift, really.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a quick example, and I saw this up close. It was one of the many benefits and blessings of being on the leadership team at North Point. But Andy Stanley's the pastor there. I think Andy's one of the best communicators, not just in church world, but just in the world. And so he could have easily leaned on that gift.
Sure.
But he was 3 weeks ahead. Every week, unless there was some kind of catastrophe, every Wednesday he was in sermon planning mode. And people would say, how is he so consistent and how is he so good? Well, and part of that's his strengths and gifting, true. But he did not rely on the strength and gifting. Every Wednesday, unless there's something terrible that's happened in the world, or he's on vacation, every Wednesday, and not just Wednesday leading up to that Sunday, he's 3 weeks ahead. And so he's putting that sermon in the crock pot and it's simmering. And that's so smart and so wise. And I tell everybody, you don't have to be Andy Stanley, you can be you. But if you get 3 weeks ahead in something like that, it's awesome. And that's why business leaders, they should actually be better at communicating because they don't have to preach on the regularity that a church person has. They don't have to speak like every 7 days. And so, but I've seen business leaders cheat on that and still work up, and they feel like they're in college again, cramming for a test overnight.
Yeah.
And so I saw that up close and personal with Andy not cheating. He was very disciplined and he didn't cheat his gift.
Yeah, and I think even in the business world, not only communicating, but maybe even creating the margin. Maybe early on as you started the business,
sure.
Yes, you were all in, hands on, here we go, and you're thinking through every system, every process, every piece of this. And then now it's just easy to cheat the gift of maybe what you were creating and say, well, it's kind of functioning, it's fine, but what if it could be tweaked? What if it could be better? What if it could be made excellent if you would block off some margin time and really focus on creating, innovating, things like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about a few different things. Of course, you're navigating the transition from the ministry world, the nonprofit world, now back into business and kind of linking up the first part of your life. It sounds like you've lived forever.
Yeah.
The first part of your life and the second part of your life, you're linking all these 7 years, strands together. One of the questions I'd like to ask as we kind of wrap this up is, as a person of faith and as someone who has come from ministry, how difficult is it maybe to navigate? And you touched on this a little bit. Same with John Maxwell. I think you're always going to be you, but do you have to tiptoe sometimes, or is it difficult to navigate? How much can I share? Or are you at a point in your life where you're like, I am who I am, and if it costs me the paycheck, It is what it is, because you mentioned earlier, you don't get paid every 2 weeks. So how do you navigate faith in speaking to like the business that you did, last week?
So this is a big passion point of mine. And one of the reasons for that is when I left Chick-fil-A to go help start a church in the Atlanta area, the question I got was, hey, when did you decide to go into full-time ministry? Tell me about your decision to go into full-time ministry. And I was like, time out. I appreciate the question. I understand the question. I grew up in the church, but I was already in full-time ministry. And that wasn't because I was working at Christian Chicken that's closed on Sundays, all right? I was already in full-time ministry. And I think we do business leaders and people in the marketplace, or even nonprofit but not church related, who are believers, we do them a disservice, and we unintentionally sometimes criticize them or demean them by saying, as a pastor, I'm in full-time ministry. You're not really. You're not as dedicated as me. I mean, I think we would say that King David was in full-time ministry. I think we would say, the Apostle Paul's in full-time ministry, although he was actually a business person making tents and selling tents. And so we have to understand full-time ministry. If you're a believer in Jesus, congratulations, you're in full-time ministry. The other thing I think we have to understand is what a Christian business is. There's no such thing as a Christian business. They're a business run by people who are Christians. And so what that means is there are a lot of people who have worked for Christian leaders, Christian business leaders, who've had a terrible experience at work. And so being a leader who runs a business, that doesn't mean we slap Bible verses on, the product. You can do that. I think that's awesome. It doesn't mean that you necessarily do Bible studies at lunch. I'm all for Bible studies at lunch at the workplace. That's awesome. The most important thing that you can do is to run a well-run business and to serve the customers and your team. I think it breaks God's heart to see his sons and daughters being mistreated at work. And I think everyone deserves to be led well. So I think the first place we have to start is serving the team and being Christ-like to those that we serve, our customers, our team, and our community. Then when you do that, the Apostle Paul said that we carry the aroma of the gospel with us. Some like the smell of it and some don't.
Sure.
When I go, it's so funny to me, Justin. This happened to me last week. I do this talk. It's in a completely secular environment. It's a business thing. They've trusted me with this. It's part of their rebrand. I do the foretalk. I don't say a word about anything. Afterwards, I come down and people come up and say, hey, can you pray for me? Or, hey, I have a question about this or that. Now, they introduced me as a former pastor, not, so they've gotten a little bit of a clue. So I just go in and I do what God's entrusted me to do, to be in that moment, to be the very best I can be for what they've called me to do. I'm not there to make a point. I'm not there to make a stand. I'm not there to criticize anybody. I'm there to do what God's called me to do, which is to talk about, what do you want to be known for? Then let the conversations lie.
Yeah.
And that's been fun for me to see. And so I believe that, and John Maxwell told me that I was having dinner with him last week, and he said Billy Graham told him that one of the ways God's going to win the world is through the business world. Because more people go to work than go to church nowadays. And so it's a huge opportunity. But that doesn't mean we go to work and beat people over the head. It means we do the very best that we can as leaders. We serve them well. Excellence really, really matters. Martin Luther had this quote that God loves it when a maid sweeps the floor, not because he or she may sing Christian hymns while she sweeps, but because God loves clean floors. And there's just something about excellence, I think, that honors God. So you go do your very best, lead the very best, and serve the very best that you can, and then let God, shine through you. And I think when we're faithful at work, it honors God, and then people are drawn to that.
I love your mentioning of excellence. One of my favorite, thoughts from several years ago is mediocrity exposes a lack of love. And it really does. It exposes a lack of love for the gifts that maybe God has entrusted to us and the opportunities he's entrusted to us. But it also exposes a lack of love for those that we're serving. In the business world, in the nonprofit world, whatever it is, if we're not giving our best, we're saying, hey, you don't deserve the best. You don't deserve, I'm not going to do that. And it really exposes the lack of love. So I love you bringing up excellence, because it really is you being who God created you to be in any avenue. And another saying, I guess, that I've always held true to is earn the opportunity to share the gospel. You don't have to come out, guns a-blazing with verses here and there and beating over the top of the head with the Bible. But when they get to know Jeff, when they get to have that relationship, when they get to have that opportunity, and they then trust you, then they may ask you. And I think about it in Peter where it says, hey, when they ask you about the hope.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so many Christians, even in the business world, are not living out their faith. No one's asking us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier to share the gospel as a Christian in a business setting when someone's asking you, hey, tell me why you're so joyful. Hey, tell me why this doesn't bother you when obstacles are coming. Hey, tell me why. It's so easy to share the gospel then, because they're asking you and they're eager to hear. So
yeah. Well, and again, I think John Maxwell's a great example. As of this week, he's in Guatemala, and the government of Guatemala has said, can you help train our leaders?
Yeah.
And John wants to see a country transformed by the time his life is done. And they just gave him an award this week, the Minister of Peace. So, but he didn't go in and go, hey, I'm a Christian. So, I mean, what he did is he went and taught leadership, and he built trust.
Yeah.
But at the end of these days that he's with them, he goes, okay, the leadership training's over. I'm done. Now, if you want to stick around, I'm going to tell you about the greatest decision I've ever made, but you don't have to stick around for that. We're done. We're going to take a break, come back. 90% of the room sticks around and he talks about Jesus. All right. But he's earned the trust to be able to do that because he's talked about leadership. He's spoken about leadership. He's taught them. And now the government of Guatemala, John's been there so long, they begin to think, wow, this leadership thing is really working. Well, John would say this, all the stuff he's teaching is in the Bible, right? Yeah. Right. And then they give him this award, Minister of Peace. And I was kidding him. I'm like, wow, Minister of Peace. I thought that was Jesus, but no, it's you now, John. So, but the government is like, hey, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, but here's John, the way he started his approach. I mean, to use the language, I think the president of Guatemala thought John Maxwell's for us. We trust him. Whatever you want to do, we trust you now.
Yeah.
That should be our approach. I think that was the approach of Jesus. I think that was the approach of Paul. Walking around Athens going, hey, I see there's a statue here to the unknown God. I actually know who that is. If you want to come over and talk to me, I'll tell you about that.
Right.
Well, he's learning who they are. So that's why I think the business world, where you're a teacher, in the restaurant, whatever it may be, it's a huge opportunity. But let's don't beat people over the head. Let's truly serve them, be excellent, and earn the right to be heard.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up just some practical maybe advice for those in our audience who would say, hey, listen, I'm a believer. I want to live out my faith at my job, in my business. Maybe you're a business leader and you say, you know what, up until this point, maybe my employees wouldn't have seen my faith, or they wouldn't say, hey, he's a Christian, she's a Christian, whatever it is, other than being able to add value, earn trust, be you, all the way through, and let them see that, and building those relationships so that you can earn the opportunity. What are some other practical tips that you would say, hey, if you're tomorrow, when you hear this, you're listening to this, you're watching this, whatever it is, and you go in tomorrow, here's two things that you could really focus on that really going to help you live out your faith in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Well, two of them, and they're really simple. First, and they're so simple, you might roll your eyes at it, but I've actually seen this work. Number one is to write handwritten thank you notes. And again, you may say, I'm not the leader, it doesn't matter. I mean, when the leader writes a handwritten thank you note, there's a certain weight to that. I get that. But writing a handwritten thank you note, and if you did that once a week, currently, I'll just be honest with you. Here's what I'm doing. One of the things I'm doing this year is I'm writing one thank you note a day, and I'm 100% at that. But it's only, we're recording this in late April. But the feedback I've already gotten on that is amazing. But it's not just thank you for being alive. It's like, hey, I saw you do this. I just want to say thank you for helping our company reach, our potential, whatever. So you being a person of gratitude, expressing gratitude is a game changer, especially if you're the boss. The second thing I would do, another biblical principle, I mean, I'm just ripping this off from Jesus, is go the second mile. If this is what your job is, we don't settle there. We go the second mile. That's who we are. That's what we're supposed to be about. We don't settle. We don't try to get away with doing the minimum. If this is what is expected of me, that's not the ceiling, that's the floor. I'm going to go to the second level. I'm going to exceed expectations. That's who our leader has said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go the second mile. And the reason that's so important is if we actually did that, I think business leaders and marketplace leaders would be going, I don't believe what these crazy Christians believe, but man, how do you hire them? They're amazing.
Yeah.
They always do above and beyond. That's what the business world says, above and beyond. What in essence they're saying is second mile. So handwritten thank you notes, go the second mile. If you do those two things consistently, you're going to be fine. And God's going to open up doors. I think God's looking for people who can be trusted with where they are.
Yeah.
And you show gratitude, that shows your attitude, and then you go beyond and above and beyond, and you go the second mile. That honors God.
Yeah. Be faithful where you are. Why would he trust you with more if you're
Yeah.
not faithful where you are?
Yeah.
So small things lead to big things.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to add to our audience, our listeners? Any just your favorite quote, whatever it may be? Is there anything that you want to add just today to them?
Well, my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes came from my first business mentor, and I think he was quoting either the CEO of Coke or maybe Harry Truman. I'm not sure who is attributed to this, but the quote was, there's not a limit to what a person can do when he or she doesn't care who gets the credit. And that's a test of humility. And so one of the things I teach my kids is be humble or be humbled, your choice. You can be humble and go first, or if not, then life will humble you. And we've all seen stories in history where life humbles people, and we've all been there. We've all done that. So I think, but having the balance of confident humility, and from a person's faith's perspective, it would be confidence to knowing that God's with you, but a humility to know that if it's on you, then everything's going to fall apart. So and one of the books that I read, this is not a Christian book, but I read this book every year, is Ego is the Enemy by Ron Holiday. And it's just a reminder that ego is the enemy. And so it's a test that we get to pass or fail every day and every year. So I would just lead with confident humility, because there's not a limit to what a person can do when he or she doesn't care who gets the credit.
Yeah, confident humility. Love that. Well, honored that you would choose to be with us today and take the time to add value to our listeners, and incredible getting to watch this journey where it is now, finishing your book. Incredible book. If you haven't picked it up, What to Do Next, I want to encourage you to do that. And 4 is actually still in my top 3 books life. It stays on my desk constantly at the top so that I
Can
see
you share
it.
the other 2?
So, no, I can't share the other 2.
I didn't want.
Maybe one day they'll be on the podcast. You just never know. Don't want to throw those out just yet, but definitely in the top 3. Want to encourage you to pick that up. If not, if you don't have it, encourage you to do that. But honored that you would spend some time with us today, and really for the days ahead, I'm excited to see where this journey takes, and hopefully staying connected and watching that.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us.